episode 76 of the Future Tribe Show. I am Germaine.
And I'm Kelsey.
We've got a bunch of topics today, a lot of logo refreshes again. I feel like a few of those happened later on in the week. But getting into what we're going to cover on this episode of the podcast and the show, we're going to be talking about the Coca Cola hug logo, the fact that Facebook now shows ads in search/URL bar.
Firefox?
Firefox, sorry, what did I say?
Facebook.
Firefox, sorry. Facebook's downtime during the week, Facebook and related organizations, you would have all heard about it. We also got a bit of a chat about some Viagra/hair growth medication brands. Some more to talk about there, and a shout out to Windows 11.
And we'll also be discussing Boston Celtics have a new partner brand on their jerseys. We'll be looking at the 2022 WordPress default theme. Canva's had a bit of a refresh as well. We'll have a conversation about moving to a 4-day work week. It's probably something you've seen in the news a lot over the past few years, but we'll be talking about that today. Two brand refreshes. One is Unity and another one is Cadillac. And also talking about Google and YouTube choosing not to support content that denies climate change and similar issues. So they're taking a stand against that.
A lot to uncover, I think. Let's roll the intro and get talking. All right, so the first thing that we mentioned was the Coca Cola logo, the hug logo is what they're calling it. Or I guess it's supposed to represent the curvature of a bottle or the traditional containers that you consume Coca Cola through. They've done something pretty creative with it and made it look or used it as sort of a representation of hugging. Let me share that for everyone who's watching the video. So this is what we see here. There's a few examples of hugging, of Coca-Cola bottles sort of clinking, and they've also got the new marketing phrase, which is real magic, and some creative sort of applications of this. My initial feedback or my initial feeling about this is it's quite smart, especially for a brand like Coca-Cola. I think it's something that only more established brands can really get away with because you already know what the Coca-Cola logo looks like. If you are trying to get your logo out there and get people to recognize your logo, this might not be the best approach. But with an organization like Coca-Cola, maybe even McDonald's, potentially even Facebook, this is definitely something that you could attempt. What do you think, Kelsey?
Yeah, I really like it. A brand like Coca Cola, I think the biggest asset that they've had for years and years and years is that iconic Coke bottle. And I'm sure at some point I've heard that they'd sort of trademarked the shape of the bottle and things like that. So to then translate that into the logo, and they've done it really in a really smart way in that the edges of the Coke, the word, the way that they're actually curved, it's not just a plain old sort of curve. It actually does follow that shape of where it would sit on the bottle. So it's not sort of a uniform curve, which I think is really awesome because you can sort of visualize, you're so familiar with that shape. It really just sits there really nicely. Unsure on the real magic tagline. I'm not really sure what it means to me. Maybe I'd need to see a, ad campaign or something beyond just the tagline to understand it and put it in context, but I'm sure that they'll find a good way to explore that.
Well, I'm sort of cracking a bit of a smile because their chief marketing officer has said that real magic is not just a tagline, that it is a philosophy, which, I mean, the intentions around it is to increase the Coca-Cola consumer base through an ecosystem of experiences anchored in consumption occasions such as meals and breaks and merged with consumer passions like music and gaming. So I think what they're trying to say with real magic is the the magic of the moment sort of terminology, and sort of sharing that experience with real people. I think in the COVID lockdown age, that sort of, I mean, hugs are such a I don't know, crucial thing nowadays. I think it's very it's hugs sort of a simple thing, or at least has been a simple thing, but nowadays you can't really hug just anyone. I mean, if you can hug at all. Um,
Yeah.
so maybe it's a bit of good timing on their part, or maybe this real magic is supposed to sort of talk about the magic of the moments and the fact that you can share magical moments with loved ones, with family, with the people you want to hug. There's a
Mhm.
nice, I don't know, there's a nice positive message there as well. Like there's a couple in this shot with a Coca Cola bottle in the back pocket. I don't know. I've never done this with a glass Coca Cola bottle. I don't know about you,
No.
Kelsey.
I mean, women's pockets wouldn't fit it anyway, to be fair,
It is a
but that's
back
a
pocket
different
though, so
conversation.
I haven't heard any comments about women's back pockets being too small.
Yeah, fair.
Um,
No, I do like the hug concept. It's
maybe
funny because I
this
feel like a lot of brands kind of shy away from talking about like hugs and contact and stuff because of COVID, but it's nice that Coke's leaned into it in a different way without really making it like, oh, we shouldn't be doing that. It's COVID times. I think they've done that quite well.
they've also not made a big deal about, like, it's not a overt hugging representation or symbolism. I think they've done it in a somewhat subtle way. To me, what we're looking at the screen here, and for those listening to the podcast, is essentially laughter at what looks like a kid's birthday party. It's very colorful. There's balloons, there's smiles, and a Coca-Cola bottle, of course, in the shot. But to me, this is sort of what that real magic trademarked term really aims to represent. It's these magical moments. I think as someone who, I mean, I don't have kids, but looking at this, it looks magical to me. It looks like the kind of thing that, parents talk about when they sort of mention the memories that they'll sort of always remember and always look back at fondly. And I think that's what they're trying to represent in this.
Hmm, I do like it.
Yeah. On to the next one. Firefox. When I accidentally said Facebook, but Firefox. Here we go. Address bar has ads now. You can apparently disable them, but essentially, what happens is when you start searching or start typing in a search in the bar up the top, you can see me selecting it on the screencast. The Firefox essentially just shows ads there, or has partners marketing within those search results. I wanted to mention this because it's just another example of ads just really crossing into the mainstream and sort of getting into more products than ever before. I think Facebook advertises so much that I don't really use Facebook anymore. There have been examples of sort of budget phone manufacturers pushing ads on home screens. I've heard of even Samsung pushing it on like their really high end products.
Yeah, my Samsung does that for sure.
Wow,
Yeah.
mine doesn't, but I don't know why mine doesn't. Yours is not necessarily just a budget Samsung either.
No,
Um,
I'm not
I've
sure.
heard
It's only in very specific situations, but I can't think of what they are, but it's definitely pushed through from Samsung. So it's not sort of
right,
intrusive as much as it could be, but
but
it
it's
is
there.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard of TVs doing the same thing, talking about like screensavers. On some TVs, like my TV at home's got a screensaver, but there's talk of putting advertising and pushing advertising already in some regions through those. So imagine you buying a TV for thousands of dollars, putting it as the centerpiece in your living room to
My
then have
goodness.
ads. Exactly.
It
I
feels
know.
very Black Mirror-esque, doesn't it?
Exactly, and that's sort of what I wanted to talk about and why I wanted to point this out. Like, what do we do? Google Chrome, people don't like it because of the privacy aspect and the fact that Google sort of follows you around. But then when I would say the only other browser that can really stand up to Google Chrome is Firefox is doing this. Is it just a money grab? Are they? I haven't looked into it. Maybe they're not profitable at all. And I mean, they're a not for profit, but not for profits still need to make money to keep running. Um, it's just an interesting one. I just wasn't sure how I felt about it.
Hmm. I am not sure how I feel about it either because I feel like it's going to be a case of people that are less familiar with the user interface and things are going to be more likely to click on those ads without actually recognizing that they're ads. I mean, I'm not sure how they're planning to display it. It might just be a case of having a little like suggested or like, like you do on social media. It's just got a tiny little thing saying promoted. And it's hard to distinguish sometimes. So then all of a sudden you don't know that you're being advertised to. And I think that there's a lot of ethical questions in that
Well,
when
I
you're
think in an
unsure.
ideal world, they do the bare minimum so that it's obvious enough. Like bare minimum saying, I don't think the only examples I've seen of platforms doing enough to make it clear that ads are ads is when there's a little advertisement sort of label underneath an ad, um, or in the previous uh, Verge screen share, there was a powered by company name under an above an ad. Those are very obvious instances, but I mean, it makes sense, right? You wouldn't want something to be seen as an ad because as soon as you see that it's an ad, or as soon as it's overtly clear that it's an ad, it suddenly loses its impact. So,
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like there'd be an opportunity there though for a company who's really like big on transparency and things to leverage on being transparent with the ads and build a customer base, I guess, off always being honest with that. I feel like it could really tie into a couple of brands really well, but it would have to be careful execution.
well, it could, but then you're talking about two completely opposing things here, right? So, a company getting enough market share without funding from advertising, essentially, is what you're talking about. Because if you make it clear that something's an ad, less people are likely to click on it. That's
Hmm.
almost a fact.
Yeah, but from the perspective of the brand that's advertising, like pushing through whatever channel it is, I think there'd be an opportunity there to say, hey, yep, this is an ad, but we're being really honest with you that it's an ad. I feel like there is room there for it, but it would just
But
be,
what does that do? Like, if you saw that something was an ad, would you?
I'd be like, hey, you're being really honest with me. Thanks for that. Let's see what you're wanting to push to
Would
me.
you? Would you? So you would take
Maybe.
time out of your day to just check out an ad that? I mean, even getting noticed in the first place is like think about in that sort
Hmm.
of lens, right? Like, so 2 in 100 people notice you, and then you're going to say that, hey, this is an ad. Click on me. What's that going to do to your conversion rates?
Yeah, I don't
Maybe an
know.
opportunity for us to run some ads
Yeah,
and test it out. Who knows?
it could work. I mean, if you sort of take it to a different space, like TV advertising, let's say, everyone knows when the commercials come on, it's the commercials really obvious. But that doesn't stop TV ads being important and helpful.
Well, TV ads are the biggest reason that Netflix succeeds because you don't see
Yeah.
ads.
Yeah.
People are moving from. I mean, radio,
Yeah.
same thing, right? I don't. Radio is the biggest reason why Spotify succeeds, why music streaming succeeds.
I
Why
mean,
else
there's
would
definitely other elements to it. But yeah, that would be one of them.
a huge reason. I don't watch YouTube free because there's ads. I
Hmm.
don't watch anything that I mean, where possible, if ads were invasive enough, intrusive enough, I would pay to not see those things. Like on YouTube, it's a bit of a different story around the web because generally Google penalizes sites that have ads that in essentially take over the viewer's experience or make it a negative sort of experience. But that again is because Google makes so much money through Google ads that it's in Google's interest to make it hard for advertisers to get better reach. So it's a whole can of worms. We don't have to get into it, but I think it's an interesting one. It's one of those things that I would just disable straight away if I was a Mozilla Firefox user. Um, moving on from that to Facebook's downtime. Now, I noticed this. Did you notice it?
I did. I realized how much of an addict I felt like when I woke up in the morning and I think I clicked on Instagram first, and then I tried to go to Facebook, and then I tried to message somebody on Messenger. I couldn't get through anywhere, and I just was like, I feel so disconnected. I don't know what to do in this circumstance. Definitely eye opening for me. But yeah,
I
definitely
did
noticed it.
laugh. I did laugh when I saw Mark Zuckerberg sort of apologies or posts about it, because he was saying, "We are sorry we let you down. You use Facebook and Facebook's many companies to connect with your loved ones. That is the biggest thing that I feel like in terms of a loss. It's not the advertising revenue that we've lost, so on and so forth." Um, the only reason I laughed is because increasingly, initially, I used to think when people called Mark Zuckerberg sort of a computer, I used to sort of say, think, be nice to the guy. He's done really well. He's built this. I mean, it's an amazing thing that he's been able to do, um, through, maybe not so great means,
Yeah.
um, but then, hearing you sort of mention that, Kelsey, and talking to my family, how many of them use WhatsApp. Viber's in there as well, in terms of
Hmm.
sort of that sort of communication, conversation. But WhatsApp's big, Instagram's big, Facebook's big. I actually still experienced a few things that were sort of a bit funky on Instagram and Facebook, as recently as just a few minutes ago. So it's clearly an ongoing thing that is trying to be rectified. But I think what it also did was brought up an interesting conversation. I saw a few competitors and, email newsletter software, for example, take it as an opportunity to say, hey, don't, like, this is a reminder that you shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket. This is a reminder that you need to take ownership over your own platform, ownership over your own network and your own group. I mean, we have a Facebook group. Um, by the way, shameless plug, go check it out. Link in the description. But it raises an interesting question. Like, do we, the reason we have a Facebook group is convenience. Like, Facebook's already got the users. So how much easier is it to get them to just click a join button than if we were to create our own platform, have to maintain that? It's not difficult or impossible. It's just additional work that
Hmm. More
Facebook can do for
friction.
us for free.
Yeah.
And exactly, more friction as well. We've got to send them there. So I think it's raised some interesting questions, and then at the same time, there's talks about what crypto and decentralization will do. So potentially in the future, websites won't even require like this very controlled framework to operate, because what's happened here with Facebook is essentially that the 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 instructions on how to find the Facebook services, the instructions that are given to computers and mobile devices, were just wrong or incorrect or messed up, and because of that, without the instructions of where to look, they couldn't function, they couldn't work. But I think, you know this still sort of is a good reminder for anyone listening who's got a business. Facebook groups are fantastic, but think about what would happen if Facebook was to go down tomorrow, and then also accidentally like delete your data, delete your group's information. You should be extracting that information as much as possible, not because you want access to people, but because people should be joining those groups to be able to sort of have that shared experience with you, or to be able to hear what you have to say, or to be able to communicate with you or others in that group. So by doing this, I think, but by sort of trying to own as much of that information, you're probably doing them a service, because at the end of the day, they're not joining just for the sake of it or just for the fun of it. They're joining because they want to share or have a share of whatever you're sort of putting out there, and whatever your message is. So just had to mention it. I know there's a bit going on with Facebook and how they target minors, and there's a lot of things to unravel there. It's still early days in terms of what's happening in the US regarding that. So potentially something that we'll talk about in the next episode, or maybe even as a special episode. But at this stage, I think we can leave it at that. The next thing I wanted to talk about was I've seen an increase in Pilot and brands like that are essentially men's personal care brands that have recently sort of blown up. I did some research around why that was, and actually found out that the patent around Viagra and hair growth medication sort of happened to expire at a very similar time, and that essentially raised this opportunity for brands to just startups to essentially copy those products, but do it under one label and only be differentiated by marketing and branding. Now, this isn't a new phenomenon, but I think it's an interesting thing to point out and an interesting sort of conversation to have, because I've seen this in the past with watch brands and watch manufacturers. I've seen it happen with toilet paper as well. And I think you mentioned, Kelsey, you've seen something happen similar to this as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm familiar with there's a machine called a TENS machine, which is kind of like muscle repair and relaxation things, and just sort of exploring that space, seeing how many different variations there are of the same product that all, they can range from like 50 Australian to 200 Australian, but there's no real difference between them besides like the marketing that goes into it. So I'm not sure what the like sort of patent stuff behind it is, but yeah, that's one product that I picked up on.
I mean, people say it's all marketing, but it's when these new brands come up that I really understand that it really is all marketing. I mean, obviously I know it's all marketing. The other one was tissue paper. So we were looking at, or toilet paper. We were looking at trying to get something that is really good for the environment, or as good for the environment as possible. We looked at a few variations and a few different options, and the big one was just get 100% recycled toilet paper. When I started sort of going down that rabbit hole, as it turns out, big brands like Who Gives a C, I'm not going to say the word because I think it's a swear word in on some platforms, but it's a very big brand, I would say. Kelsey, you've heard of them?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah,
Yeah, they've got
you've
some
heard
really
of them.
funky sort of branding and wrapping and stuff.
Branding, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's really targeting millennials. But as it turns out, it's a good product, but it's the same thing that you can buy off AliExpress straight from China, which is 100% recycled. But ultimately, there's not a huge difference. In fact, there are competitors who essentially sell for the same price, and it's all just branding and marketing. And what you've got to do is look a bit further into it to work out what is the product's actual characteristics and value there. Don't get me wrong, at the end of the day, the way the world works, people pay for the amount of eyeballs that you can reach, and that's the real value. So there are some I love my watches, and there's a brand called Movement. I think it was Movement. There are a few who have been purchased, acquired, sold to more established watch manufacturers, for example, or fashion brands, for example, simply because these new brands, I'm talking about not the likes of Citizen or Seiko, because those are staple brands that, I think they've always done well. They'll continue to do well, but brands like that, that don't have a strong marketing push. I don't know about you, but I don't really see advertising for either of them unless I go past a jeweler maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But these watch brands that come up who essentially just creates cheap Chinese, like buys $10 watches from China and sells them for $250 because they can put a layer of marketing that you and I, if we are not interested in that product past, say, I want a nice watch or I want a simple looking watch, we're not going to look into, okay, what kind of watch is it? I mean, do you, Kelsey, know that there are different like technologies behind watches? Do you know the difference between quartz watches or automatic or semi-automatic watches?
No awareness, but I'm not a watch person, so I
But
think I'm the
well,
wrong person to
exactly.
ask.
Well, but that's my point, right? So if you were to look at a watch that looked good, and you were just after a nice watch to wear as a fashion accessory, and it costs, an okay amount. Like, you didn't think it was outrageous. Like, it's not a, $20,000 Rolex, but it's a $200,
Still too
nice
much.
watch,
But yeah.
or a $50 nice watch. You're
There we go.
probably looking at it from a aesthetic or fashion point of view, not
Yeah.
a, principles and characteristics and features point of view.
Hmm.
And I just wanted to have a quick chat about it because it kept sort of popping up all over the web in terms of new brands who essentially do the same thing as any other brand, but it's just a marketing
Yeah.
push. Um,
I mean, thinking
and
about the toilet paper that you sort of brought up before, I feel like there's a really important place for some of those companies who are putting the marketing into it, because for that product, for example, unless you're really into your sort of sustainability sort of mindset, you might not even be aware that 100% recycled toilet paper is an option. So you've got these companies who are putting the marketing in to say, here are the benefits of what we're doing. Yes, it's the same product you can buy from the factory in China, but here's why you should buy ours, because we're telling you all this extra information. So I feel like there is an important place for those companies to get that information out. They're kind of like doing a social service in a way, depending on the company, of course. Because I mean, that's what made you aware of 100% recycled toilet paper existing.
I get it. Yeah, completely. I think my point here is, because what you're talking about is really what is the point of difference, and how are they able to get more market share than anyone else. And your point is completely valid, because you're saying if they're able to educate their target market or educate a certain demographic, that's a good thing at the end of the day. Okay, yes, they might be selling it for more, but then that marketing that they have to do costs more. Like, it's
Yeah, they've
not
got to cover those costs.
exactly, it's not cheap or free.
Hmm.
So it makes total sense. But at the same time, it's a reminder that marketing's everywhere, and marketing's not everything at the same time, or the
Yeah,
most accurate. So
absolutely. You have to take all those things with a grain of salt, I think, because you can look at that company and go, hey, that's a really good idea. I get it. Let's look further in and maybe I'll find this cheaper alternative.
or look into it and sort of ask yourself, like, are all these things worth paying for? Um, what's there to it more than just what's being marketed to you?
Yeah.
Um, from that to talking about Microsoft's new latest product, Windows 11. Bit of a change of pace there, but you've been using Windows 11
Yes.
as
A little while.
in sort of release candidate or beta form for
I accidentally installed it without realizing.
on your work laptop, so on
Yeah.
your like main laptop, but
Whoops.
you haven't had a bad experience with it at all, have
No,
you?
it's been really smooth. I haven't had any problems with it. I've really enjoyed the user experience as well. Obviously, it's not a massive, I mean, visually there's a change, but the core sort of functions and everything are still pretty much the same.
Yeah, so it's I didn't have a great experience when I accidentally installed Windows 11 on one of my devices, so I've been a bit burnt. I haven't tried it. You've been running it, Kelsey, for like 2 to 3 months, I want to say.
Yeah, about
So
that.
a fairly decent amount of time, and if there were issues with the operating system, those would have already popped up on your device. But this is more of a shout out than necessarily a deep dive into it. So if you've got a Windows 11 compatible device, you should check it out. There's not a lot to talk about when it comes to the operating system itself, but they also haven't pushed out, well, Microsoft hasn't also pushed out all the new functionality within Windows 11. So there might be things worth talking about in the future. From that into Vista Print, the reason I giggle is because of Windows Vista, um,
Tuh.
and Vista Print. The chance.
You'd
What
make
are the
that connection.
chances?
Yeah.
I don't like what you're implying. No. So you spotted this one, Kelsey, and
Yes.
you were a bit confused by it, which is completely fair.
Hmm.
Let me share what it is that we're going to
Yeah.
talk about.
I had to ask for some clarification before this stream. So we spotted it on brand new. which we love. I seem to check it almost every morning to see what brand updates there are. And this one came up. So as you can see in the image, it is just on the Boston Celtics jersey at the moment. So Vistaprint you might be familiar with. That's the one on the left. Their logo you might be more familiar with. It's sort of the V. There's like 4 different colors that would come into it, a bit of overlap sort of stuff going on. The new logo, whether it's the logo they're using everywhere or not, I'm unsure, is pretty much identical to the Celtics curvature, I guess, and the font that they use. So it seems like they've just duplicated that maybe for like a visual, I don't know, consistency kind of approach. So I did have to check whether it was an actual rebrand or just a rebrand on the jerseys. I
I
don't know. I'm
think,
not sure how I feel about it.
well, this comes back to, I think, looking at something for its purpose versus looking at something for its design or layout. While it does cause confusion for someone like you, Kelsey, um, I would say that even that confusion that is caused leads you to visit the actual Vistaprint site to confirm. And that's only because you're aware of Vistaprint.
Mm-hmm.
But if you'd never heard of Vistaprint before, in this screen grab that you can see on video, I would say hands down, Vistaprint on the left, or the old Vistaprint logo, is not legible.
Yeah.
Nowhere near as legible as Vistaprint on the right hand side of the new version.
Mm-hmm.
So this, I think, raises a question of, what is it okay to change a logo, or this might not even be a logo, this might just be a great example of using the space that they've clearly paid a lot of money for to get
Mm-hmm.
more bang for their buck. Because their
Yeah.
previous logo, I mean, was fine if you are already aware of the V icon, but if that, had no impact on you, well, what's the point of
Yeah.
Vista or the money?
It's interesting to note as well. I was just looking at sort of the rest of the jersey. Nike is going in there very confident with a white tick on a white shirt. And they're just going, yeah, everyone knows who we are. It's fine. We don't need to stand out. I kind of love that confidence.
It is, yeah, it is interesting. I actually didn't notice the Nike tick until you mentioned it, and I sort of looked a bit closer. Um, but then again, Nike probably has a lot more presence within, I mean, definitely a lot more presence within the sporting world, but also probably within the stadium itself,
Yeah.
within other apparel. For all we know, everyone's rocking, Nike um, shoes with big Nike ticks on them,
Mm-hmm.
where Vistaprint wouldn't necessarily get that level of coverage, or have the opportunity to have that level of coverage. So um, yeah, this raises that question of, I think, at the end of the day, what are you trying to achieve? I ultimately, I think, would like this approach. It doesn't do anything for brand image and consistency, but it does everything for, awareness. And
Yeah. It's much more readable, that's for sure.
and at the end of the day, what are you spending your marketing dollars for? For someone
Yeah.
to see your name and remember your name, or for someone to see an icon and remember
Half
an
recall
icon
it,
that,
maybe not quite. Maybe remember a
well,
color, but that's
yeah,
not helpful.
even if you remember the icon, unless you know the name, it's I mean, working on our own branding, that's a conversation that I was having with Damien yesterday about what is the goal of an icon. Does the icon need to stand out more? Does it matter how much it stands out if the name of the organization itself is not as legible? And I think at the end of the day, that needs to be the priority, reading the name of the organization, because that's what you can Google, that's what you can get to a website with, that's what you can sort of be a customer of a business with. So I think it makes a lot more sense what they've done here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we'll also get this conversation around Canva's new logo refresh out of the way while we're talking about brand new and talking about other brands. And I mean, Vistaprint's a design sort of brand as well. But what are your thoughts on this one?
I like it, but it feels like a step backwards. And I'm not sure if I can articulate why it does, but it feels like an older logo than the Canva and the circle. And I feel like they've sort of lost an opportunity by getting rid of that circle to have that, really solid stamp of this is Canva, here's our circle, recognize the color. I'm not
Is it
sure.
because it's sort of got old school Instagram vibes with the
I was
gradient?
just thinking, makes me think of Instagram because
Oh,
of that
well, and
gradient.
the cursive
Yeah.
font, right? Instagram, do they still use? I think they still actually do use the cursive.
Yeah,
Um,
I think more so they use the icon now because that's so recognizable. But when they do use the text, it does have the cursive and the gradient, as far as I'm aware.
so maybe that's why you feel like it's a step back because
Yeah,
I mean I actually didn't notice how weak the previous letters were and the previous logo was. Like the A's are much better in the new logo.
yeah,
I didn't actually realize that that last A in the old logo looks almost like a uppercase G,
it does. Yeah,
and there's a change in angle as well. I've never given it the time of day, but looking at the Canva logo now, it the old logo was quite weak from a technical point of view. Um,
yeah,
Clearly worked fine from a marketing point of view, but I think the new logo succeeds in a technical sense, but
hmm,
um, maybe not from a marketing or branding sense.
yeah. I feel like they could have done a combination of those two, in that they've cleaned up obviously the text and everything, but kept it in the circle because I just feel like the circle adds that bit of strength. Um,
Potentially, yeah, as an iconic sort
mm,
of representation of Canva. I also wonder what they'll do on social media now that they don't have that circle. Let me
well,
actually
it'll
do a.
go into a circle anyway, won't it?
Well, would they use the whole text? Oh, there you go. So
Yeah,
they've actually almost, I mean, not quite, but they've almost brought back the circle in this example.
yeah. It's definitely it looks very familiar from the old logo, which was in the circle, obviously. But they've just kind of added that gradient and cleaned up the text. Um,
Uh, yeah, I think it's helped
mm,
that they kept the script font. Um, that they didn't, well, for consistency's sake, at least. Um, but this might be an instance where I would almost vote for them going with a flat color instead of,
yeah,
I know we've talked about this in the past, and we've both, I think, commented about logos shifting to a black and white approach as not being a great thing, but maybe this is why they just go with that approach, because when they try something different, they're not necessarily liked for it.
like I said, I don't hate it. I do like it. It just doesn't feel like a step forward, I think.
I think that's fair. That's a fair comment. But I'd be interested to hear what you think, um, listeners and watchers. Um, Moving on to looking at the 2022 WordPress theme, the default WordPress theme. Now, anyone who's familiar with WordPress knows that each year WordPress launches a default theme that is named after that new year. So the previous one was 2021. Um, Let me share what it looks like. We've got a few glimpses here. I haven't explored it too much, but sharing what it looks like in some screenshots from WP Tavern, I think it's a great example of sort of a nice simple theme. The default themes always tend to be quite simple. Um, they also tend to be compromised by open source elements. So the fonts used in this example or used in the default themes open source, just like WordPress itself, and it naturally tends to be a theme for publishing, which makes sense again. So this example, I think, for the first time, I would argue for the first time, the 2022 theme or the default WordPress theme has gone with slightly more creative approach. They tend to be somewhat more simple, but this one to me is this sort of cascading effect is a bit more stylish. And even this homepage, I think, is quite nice. What are your initial reactions, Kelsey?
Um, yeah, I mean, it's very unoffensive. It's simple, very easy, I think, to adjust to your own brand or whatever it is you're wanting to use it for, which is the point really when you've got a default theme. Yeah,
Yeah,
don't have
more
too much to
more
say about it.
more more will come out um, as we play around with it as well, and we might cover more info in future episodes. But this is a bit like Windows 11. Wanted to flag it, check it out if you're in the WordPress world. Let us know what you think about it as well. Um, Jumping back to, ooh, should we talk about the 4-day work week?
We haven't had this discussion in the office yet.
It's something that I think about all the time. And what sort of come up is The Verge sort of mentioning that game developer Eidos Montreal is switching to a 4-day work week. Um, there, the thing I wanted to bring up here is that I am not opposed to that sort of concept. Um, and the theory around it is that when you decrease your working week, productivity apparently doesn't drop. So you do the same amount of work. There's this whole thing about, people fitting, um, when it comes to workloads, fitting in the workload to the time given. So a task, might take 30 minutes if you've only got 30 minutes, but could take an hour if you've got an hour. I think this is though bigger from a sort of business sense in that it's a game developer. I don't know if you're across sort of all the drama around game development and poor working conditions, Kelsey.
I'm not, but it doesn't sound surprising from my understanding of some of the like tech startups and things in history, Facebook, for example, and just, yeah, long working hours and all that sort of stuff.
Facebook, Tesla, long working hours. Um, I Yeah, like I said, it's an interesting sort of conversation to have. I don't know. There's a comment on the Verge article saying that most of the research into 4-day working weeks show that people have a lot of downtime over the course of a 5-day week, where they're not engaged, where they're making coffee, chatting, and moving to 4 days makes people more engaged and productive over those days. Now, I don't. This is just a comment in the comment section. This might just be someone who, uh, as one of my friends would say, someone who just walked off the street and gave their thoughts on something that they actually didn't have any expertise on. But as an employee, Kelsey, what would what would your response be if I floated that idea in the office?
I think I'd be keen for it. I mean, it adds an extra day to your weekend, which is always positive. And I don't know, I think I'm very deadline driven personally. So I think if I did only have 4 days, let's say, to get something done, I'd probably work better and work harder towards those deadlines. Haven't tested it, so it could be the complete opposite, but that would be my initial reaction. But also, I am coming from the perspective of I've definitely read a lot of stuff about 4-day work weeks over the years of just random news articles popping up and different studies that pop up, and they all sort of say the same thing that I've just said. So it could be very biased from that reading those studies and things.
The only negative I could think of is being client services. I think we could have issues with whatever day we take off not being available to help clients, which obviously we're really big on, and it does then increase the lag between email on a Friday, get a response on a Monday at the earliest, to email on a Thursday, let's say, and get a response on a Monday, which by that stage, you're almost, as far apart from, like, it's basically, you know, um, half a week, more than half a week gone by that stage. Because, you know, you send an email on day 4 of a work week, you get a response on day 1 of a new work week,
Hmm.
and it, I think, raises an interesting. I mean, you have to shift sort of that sort of mentality, and I don't know how like customer facing businesses would necessarily do the 4-day work week thing.
Yeah.
It's
I think
different when
it's
you're sorry, I was
sorry.
just gonna say it's different when you're a game developer because
Yeah.
you're working towards something over a 4-year period, and you don't. I would assume you don't necessarily need to answer client emails immediately or that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it sort of goes into more of a societal discussion when you're talking about customer facing and client facing businesses, because obviously we can go, yeah, let's go to 4-day work week, but as you said, that'll impact the clients. But if the clients are also on a 4-day work week, there's no issue. But then, of course, you've got e-commerce or just shops, things like that, who operate through the weekends that might need support. Um, who already have the issue of not being able to get support, let's say for some websites or whatever, on a Saturday or Sunday, it might be more difficult. So I think there's already some issues that show up in the current setup of things, and it just ends up becoming more of a societal shift, which has happened in the past. I mean, Sundays used to be very much like religion driven, where nothing was open, and now things are open, and businesses have adjusted to that. And obviously, this is going back, I don't know, 60 years or something. But there's definitely like shifts that have happened in the past that have been a real big societal change. So it could happen.
What would
It'll
you
just take
think
time.
about 10 hours a day instead of 8 hours a day, and then getting your work week done in 4 days instead of five
Mm.
days?
The other, I mean, that sort of plays into a whole other issue, I think, in that all these studies I've read are, I can't name any of them, obviously, but a lot of the studies I've read that sort of say, people only have 4 hours or something of actual productivity in a day, in a regular 8-hour workday. And just imagine if we up that to 10, would it still be just 4 hours of productivity? Would it reduce because you're thinking about a whole 10 hours of work that you've got to get through? I don't know what kind of impact that would have. Or when they talk about moving to a 4-day work week, are they literally saying drop off an entire day, don't worry about the hours, keep it to 8 hours a day? Will the work still be done, or does it need to be increased to 10? I think there's a lot of logistical and all those different considerations that would need to go into it.
Oh, so many considerations on a. I mean, from a business owner point of view, it's really around productivity and client support. Like, not even productivity. It's about how much work can we still get the same amount of work done, because it it would require us to almost reframe estimates around projects as well, because we've suddenly like, or does it? Are we still going to be as productive? So clients who've been told we'd do something, in 8 weeks or 15 weeks, can we still stay true to that sort of time frame, or are we going to have to push those? It's a big conversation to have, again, like a few of the things we've brought up this episode, but again, I think the biggest thing for me was that there's a game developer that's done that. They work on a different. We don't work in a way that we work on a big project for 4 years and then reap the rewards. We work on projects that take 3, 6, maybe 12 months, but not years. So there's different components that goes into what we do and how we work, and different things to consider. But like I said, not totally opposed to the idea, if it
We'll have to have
meant.
more conversations about this.
Exactly. Once we've all had a chance to think about it, I think it's something that we could discuss. Um, Moving from that to Unity, we're back on brand new. The guys at brand new get shout outs all the time, every single week.
Yeah, it's our favorite
um,
website, I think.
Yeah, I would say it's one of my favorites that I visit every day. This time we're talking about Unity. Again, a nice segue because we were talking about game development. Um, this is, I would call this, a refresh probably.
Hmm.
And to me, this is a refresh in the right direction as well.
Yeah,
What do you think?
I agree. I'm not super familiar with Unity. I recognize the brand and I knew that it was game related, but beyond that, I'm actually not 100% sure. I think we're game developers, I suppose. Yeah, I like it. I think as we sort of discussed in the past, when they go to flat design, Unity's done the opposite. They haven't brought in color, but they've added two other shades of grey, which I think is nice. It adds a bit more depth and dimension to that box that they've got.
It is still flat
Um,
though.
it is,
I would say
yeah,
it's a flat logo,
but
but
it's not more flat from the previous one, which a lot of brands have been
which
doing.
is completely flat. Yeah.
Hmm.
I I like though that effect because, like you said, they haven't flattened the logo, but
They've added depth to it, but it is still
flat.
a single color, even though it's greys. But yeah, they haven't introduced any like reds or blues or anything crazy like that. Just added lighting essentially to that box. I like that
And
they've capitalized the U as well.
yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's they've tweaked the word mark a little bit. I don't know how. Look at this T here. I think the T looks a bit funny. That's the only comment with that shift. Um,
I like it.
oh, look at the whole sort of product identity system.
Wow, do you know what this has just made me think of looking at that?
Adobe.
GameCube. No, GameCube.
Oh,
Yeah, they used to have like a little box that would bounce around, and the
right,
cutout ones they've got there make me think of GameCube.
right. But it's very Adobe as well. I mean, I don't know whether Adobe were the first to use this approach of sort of acronyms within a colored sort of identity system, but
Yeah.
it does have that feel. I'm trying to work out if why is it sort of BK? Like none of the letters seem to match the names, but that's okay. I'm it's not our target group. It's not our target demographic. Um, I do like these little components though that show how each of these products help with development, um, or sort of how they relate to what element of development or what component of development. So
Hmm.
I think all in all, this is a nice example of how to sort of um, do a refresh without losing anything really. They've just
Yeah, I think
moved
they've
few
really
things
improved
around.
it.
Yeah, that's really all they've done.
I'm really curious about how that actually compares to the GameCube logo because I'm probably just imagining it now, but
Find out.
it
I'm
just looks
gonna
very similar
looks very. Oh,
from my
I
memory. But this
mean,
is memory over years. Okay.
it's a cube.
Yeah, it's a cube with the same lighting structure.
Interesting. You are not wrong. That probably has more to do with balance though than anything else, like visual
Yeah.
balance, um, rather than. Well, I don't know whether they just maybe they did just copy it.
No, there's definitely enough differences there. It was just something that was familiar when I was looking at that animation because of the movement of the cube, and I'm so familiar with watching that little. I don't know the sound that it does, but yeah.
Never had a GameCube, so
Uh,
I couldn't talk to it.
it's falling on
Um,
deaf ears then.
a little bit, but I did see the sort of similarities at least at the start there. So um, interesting brand video.
Yeah,
Slight missteps there, but then again, they've got a lot of products that they can talk about. And
I saw
okay,
GameCube again through that. Anyway.
all right. Well, one more refresh with
Gosh,
Cadillac going flat again. Well, monochrome and flat at the
in
same
a really
time.
weird way too.
Oh man, like this was an opportunity to simplify the shape without I mean, I don't know what the shape represents in the first place or the icon represents. Do you have any
Yeah,
idea?
I got no idea. I mean, I've never really looked at the original Cadillac logo that closely, and it's very odd and very complicated. So I can understand why they wanted to adjust it, but I don't know why they adjusted it to this.
Well, all they did was you used the right terminology there. They just adjusted it. They just adjusted the colors. They didn't. I wouldn't even call it a refresh. It's just a like a monochrome logo.
It's almost like if you printed off that first logo in black and white, but the printing didn't quite work, so it didn't pick up all the little
Yes.
shades and things. That's what I'm thinking of right now.
Yeah, and that's not a compliment
No.
because the old logo was already a bit of a what were they doing or what were they
Hmm.
thinking?
But at least it looks like a badge,
Is it
which you want for a
because
car.
we talked about Volvo maybe last week or the week before,
Hmm.
and they sort of flattened their logo. I think for a lot of EV applications, they're flattening logos so they can light them up because, lit up logos represent electric vehicles for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Um, I just don't get it. I feel like they shouldn't have bothered with it at all.
Yeah,
Um,
and I'm trying to picture that, like, because it's so flat and kind of trying to be a badge, but not quite, on an actual real 3D physical car, just the thought of how that would look sounds, just I don't know. It's weird.
yeah, it looks weirdly like a transformer-esque because it looks sort of like a head or like a
Mhm.
helmet. How weird.
Yeah, I just don't
How
like it.
weird. All right. That's enough talk about logos and icons, I think. Um let's cover off the last topic, which is Google and YouTube stop showing ads on content that denies climate change.
Yeah,
Pretty self-explanatory heading there. Google issued an update saying essentially ads and monetization policies on climate change. In recent years, we've heard directly from a growing number of our advertising and publisher partners who have expressed concerns about ads that run alongside or promote inaccurate claims about climate change. Advertisers simply don't want the ads to appear next to this content, and publishers and creators don't want ads promoting these claims to appear on their pages or videos. This includes content referring to climate change as a hoax or a scam, claims denying that long-term trends show that global climate change that the global climate is warming, and claims denying that greenhouse gas emissions or human activity contribute to climate change. We will also continue to allow ads and monetization on other climate-related topics, including public debates on climate policy, the varying impacts of climate change, new research, and more. My initial reaction from a black and white point of view is, why are we letting platforms decide what is right, what is wrong, what is moral, what is immoral? I think, you know, not seeing aggressive videos with, abuse or murder or blood and gore is fair, but not seeing ads and content on, I don't know, other issues, where do you draw the line?
yeah. I think it's a very big ethical conversation, obviously. Um, I mean, it's one thing to sort of have an opinion on something, and I think we've had this sort of discussion previously. Have an opinion on something versus straight up facts from the world's smartest scientists and all of that. Um, and where does social media and companies that have these kind of platforms, Google and all of that, like what point do they have to intervene? And are they allowed to intervene? And is that cutting into free speech or anything like that? I personally think that this is a great move. I mean, obviously, it's positive for the advertisers or for Google, because advertisers will continue to advertise with them. So,
That is sort of the second thing that I noticed
yeah,
is they're effectively saying people don't want to pay to advertise next to these things, so it's easier for us to remove these things and continue to take their money than stop showing ads in front of this type of content. Well, actually, what they're saying is this content is of no monetary value or financial value to us, so we're just not going to allow it anymore.
yeah, which I think is probably the main driver in it. But then there's obviously the ethical considerations of maybe not. Well, actually, yes, Google and Facebook and other platforms these days are such a breeding ground for misinformation, and obviously there's been such a crackdown on it through Instagram and all of that, where they really tag it and say, like, check the facts of this. It's related to COVID, for example. And they'll really try to call it out. So I think that it's an ethical thing to do, to sort of say this is not factually correct and we will not support you by doing this, by giving you money from advertisers and blah, blah, blah. But obviously it is also a very smart business decision to keep the advertisers on board. So it is twofold, but I think it's really positive. But it does come into that thing of, where is the line drawn? What's okay to censor? What's not okay to censor? Does it all need to be absolutely factual to go through? Can there be some opinion in there?
Well, but then what is fact? Like that's a
Yeah,
whole other.
sometimes that's not clear cut. That's the thing. Like, you can have obvious scientific stuff going on, but when there's other debates around all
Well,
sorts of different.
even obvious scientific things. There are scientists who say that climate change isn't a problem. That, it's not the general consensus. It's not the vast majority do not say that, but I mean, there are scientists who say that. There are sort of people who do research in certain areas who say that now, and that it raises a bigger question. I've had sort of conversations during the week about this sort of thing. Is like, how do we? What do we say? Do we say, okay, you're a scientist if you fit XYZ criteria? Is that how we
Yeah.
define it? Or if you went to XYZ school, your doctorate is respected, but if you got it from, doc, PhDsRus.com, we won't sort of accept it or value it.
Yeah, there's definitely, I can picture like the tin hat people sort of saying, this is a conspiracy. They'll only allow content that fits their agenda, and their agenda, who says their agenda's right, kind of thing. Um, it's a tough one because obviously, when it comes to climate change, for example, it's pretty clear that it's real. There's thousands and thousands of scientists around the world that say it is. And as you said, it depends on where those climate denying scientists are getting their degrees and things.
well,
Yeah.
it's more that how do we decide who gets, who's saying something that is supposed to be listened to more. Like, I stumbled across a debate, or heard about a debate with Alex Jones, the famous conspiracy theorist. And I was sort of like, okay, it was a debate between Alex Jones and someone else, and I thought, okay, let me check out this debate, because Alex Jones apparently just lost his mind and just was, going crazy, as he's known to do. And I didn't realize that he doesn't actually have a presence on a bunch of platforms as of 2018: YouTube, Facebook, Spotify. Um, and I then went to his website, and I could see why.
Yeah.
It's
Mm.
some
I mean,
interesting stuff.
yeah, all these platforms, they've always had community guidelines and policies that allow them to remove people that they would deem problematic. So, like this, it just is an extension of that, surely. And there is obviously
Yeah,
more ethical questions to come up around it, but it's not like it's a new thing. So
it's
I don't
not a
know.
new thing, but I think increasingly it raises questions around, okay, how much control do these platforms then have? Because if you can see more of certain type of content, if they can sculpt content, like this is going a bit crazy, but like, what if it was to be, Facebook versus the government of the United States, or government of US, UK, and Australia trying to do, XYZ to Facebook? What stops Facebook from just going, you know what? All your, all these platforms that push news in your countries, we're banning them. We're only allowing these other platforms that are on our side to push information out. And then, you know, what happens there? How do we manage that? How do we control that? Again, another topic in this week's episode that's like a
Yeah.
huge can of worms, huge topic to get into. But I'd love to hear, your thoughts. If you're listening, if you're watching the video, um, I'm gonna hop in and have conversations with anyone who wants to sort of get into these topics. And I think it's at the very least an interesting exercise in talking about different viewpoints and talking about different approaches. But a lot of news this week. But that's about it from my end. How about from you, Kelsey?
Yeah, no, I think that's everything. We definitely had a few deep conversations, topics that came up today. So our little shelf of worm cans, whatever you call them, is growing. But yeah, everything from me.
There's a lot more to get into, but uh, remember to follow, subscribe, like, do all that fun stuff. Check out the Facebook group. We've also got the Future Tribe Clips channel where you can get short snippets of things that we talk about on our longer episodes and our longer streams in bite sized, more narrow sort of content. Check all those places out and let us know if you want us to cover or discuss anything at all. You'll see all our contact details and links in the description of whatever platform you're listening to or watching this on. Have a good week, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Yeah, catch you then.